أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, tonight we're going to be reflecting on Surah Hud, the surah that the Imam just recited in Taraweeh. And some background on this surah is that it is the 11th surah in the Quran, and it was revealed during Mecca. It was revealed during the last year of the Prophet ﷺ's stay in Mecca. So the last year before they migrated to Medina as well. So if you were here last Saturday, you remember that we discussed Surah Al-Imran and that it came down in 3 different discourses or 3 different parts. A similar layout applies to Surah Hud as well, where you can split this up into 3 different themes. Right? And the 3 themes are invitation, admonition, and warning. I'll repeat it again. The 3 themes are invitation, admonition, and warning. We're not going to be discussing invitation today because for time's sake, and it's not too relevant to the topic that we're discussing tonight, inshallah. So we'll start with admonition. So for those who don't know what admonition means, it's a piece of advice that someone gives with a subtle warning attached to it. So let's say someone told you that, hey, just beware of this certain thing. They're giving you admonition. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Hud, He gives admonition to the disbelievers. But the beautiful thing about this is that He rarely addresses the disbelievers directly. As in, He never says, oh disbelievers in Surah Hud. So how does He actually talk to them? How does He actually convey this to them? Right? He does this by giving various stories of the prophets that came before the Prophet ﷺ himself. So Nuh alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, Hud alayhi salam, Shu'aib alayhi salam, Salih alayhi salam, and finally Musa alayhi salam. That's six prophets. That's really extensive. Right? The stories of 6 prophets in one surah is a lot, and that's really heavy. And I want to choose just one story to reflect on tonight, and that is the story of Nuh alayhi salam. Right? We all know his story, the basis of it, the flood and whatnot. He gave Dawah for 950 years. What is that? The lifespan of 10 to 12 people in the modern day and age? That's a lot of time. And that's a lot of sabr for someone to give Dawah for 950 years. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously, He commanded him to make the ark for the day of the flood. And that day comes when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to pass the judgment on the people of Nuh alayhi salam. So he's there with his ark and his believers are boarding. And one would assume that the first people to board the ark would be him and his family. But that was not the case. Right? And I want you to visualize this scenario. I know we had some severe weather in Jersey recently. So like east of here, in Fairfield, Wayne and whatnot, the areas got flooded. Right? And you look up to the sky, it just looks like normal rain is falling down. And then there's like 1 feet, 2 feet, 2.5 feet accumulation of water. It looks normal from the top. But when you compare it to Nuh alayhi salam's flood, the sky, it's split in half. There was no sky. It was just water gushing down like a bucket. And that was just half the scenario. The earth, the ground beneath the people, that's split in half as well. So there's water coming from beneath too. There is no ground for you to walk on. That's the scenario of this flood. So Nuh alayhi salam is there, his believers are there in his ark, and he's talking to his son. He's saying, "Oh my son, embark with us. Surely you will be amongst the believers." His son says, "No, I'm going to seek refuge in a nearby mountain and I will be fine." Nuh alayhi salam warns him again. He says, "Surely you will not be fine. You will not survive. This flood will not leave anyone." And he was right. So the flood happened. Nuh alayhi salam is there with his believers in his ark, and he watches his son drown in front of him in the flood. Can you imagine your son drowning in front of you? SubhanAllah. So they reach safely to a nearby mountain, and the flood ceased to exist after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders it to. Right? And Nuh alayhi salam, he gives one last appeal. Right? He says, "Oh Allah, surely my son is from my family. And you are the most just of justices. He's asking for forgiveness for his son. One last attempt. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala harshly, He says, "O Nuh, surely your son is not from your family. He is amongst the disbelievers. And you should not appeal to me about something that you do not have knowledge on. Right? Unless you want to be amongst the ignorant yourself." So Nuh alayhi salam is like, okay, fine. After 950 years of da'wah, his own son was not forgiven. Right? So he apologizes, and that's the end of the story. Coming back to Surah Hud, right? This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives admonition to the disbelievers. They're not directly addressed, but when they read Surah Hud, they're like, okay, this is what happened with the disbelievers in the past. We are also from these people. This may happen to us. Right? That's one theme of Surah Hud. The third and final theme is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving warnings to the disbelievers. So after all of these stories finish of all the prophets, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about the day of judgment, Yawmul Qiyamah, and how everyone will be held accountable on that day. And the verses are very extensive, so I won't recite for time's sake, but here's the translation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "No one shall speak without Allah's permission on this day. Some will be damned and some will be blessed. Those who will be damned will sigh and sob and will dwell within hellfire until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordains otherwise. And those that are blessed will dwell in paradise." Now, this is pretty straightforward stuff, right? Anyone who believes in God or even believes in the concept of God and in the hereafter, they know that this is a clear warning, right? This should move you. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns the disbelievers. Now, we've covered mainly what Surah Hud is about, right? We've covered two themes. We've covered one of the stories in Surah Hud. Now let's shift a little bit, right? Let's go to the context that it was revealed in. It was revealed in the last year of the Prophet ﷺ's stay in Mecca, which was also the year of sorrow. Sorrow as in sadness or grief. Why was it the year of sorrow? It's because the Prophet ﷺ, he lost Abu Talib and Khadija radiallahu anha in the same year. The same year. Abu Talib was his uncle who took him in after his parents passed away, and he protected him, and he basically brought him up. Right? Now he's no longer there. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to walk the streets of Mecca with so many enemies in the Quraysh, wanting to literally kill him with confidence. Why? Because Abu Talib was there for his protection. Obviously, he relied on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, but practically you still need someone to protect you. Right now, he's not there. Let's say the Prophet ﷺ had a bad day. Right? He got mocked from the Quraysh, which was very common. Right? And we all have bad days too. We all come back home to our families, to our spouses. He came back home to Khadija radiallahu anha. And one day she wasn't there either. In the same year, he lost both of them. And there are many hadiths on how the Prophet ﷺ acted after he lost his beloved wife. I'll share two of them. The Sahaba reported that he didn't smile for months after his wife passed away. For literally months. In another hadith, when Hala, the sister of Khadija radiallahu anha, she visited the Prophet, just look at my face now. I was just plain, right? This is how it shifted. He jumped up and he had a smile that went from cheek to cheek because her sister reminded him of Khadija radiallahu anha. And that's how excited he was to see her. And Aisha radiallahu anha, his wife at the time, out of jealousy, she asked, "O Prophet of Allah, how long are you going to remember this old ... because she uses some inappropriate words to describe Khadija radiallahu anha. Surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you something better than her. She's talking about herself, right? Because she's in a state of jealousy. So the Prophet ﷺ, he looked at her and said, "Wallahi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given me anyone better than Khadija radiallahu anha." Imagine the love that he has for her, right? And he's saying this to his wife at the time. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she was like, "Khair, whatever you say, right? And I'll just keep quiet from now on," right? So now in this situation, let's say one of us, we lost our uncles and we lost our spouse. what would we do? Put yourself in the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ. You would just lament. You would sulk. You would want to alleviate yourself from the duties of this life, especially if they are as hard as the Prophet ﷺ. He doesn't want to go out every single day preaching Islam in the streets when he knows that he could be killed any time, because he doesn't have Abu Talib with him anymore. Right? If he has a bad day, he doesn't have anyone to go back home to. He's all alone now. He's human too. He has these thoughts. He doesn't want to go out there. And so Surah Hud came down as consolation for him during these circumstances. All those prophet stories, right? The one that we reflected on with Nuh alayhi salam, he lost his son. And he gave 950 years of dawah. The Prophet ﷺ, in this year, he lost his uncle and his beloved wife. He was not alone. That's what the surah really told him. And it came down to him as consolation. There's a hadith about the Prophet ﷺ reading verse 112 of Surah Hud. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. فَاسْتَقِمْ كَمَا أُمِرْتَ وَمَنْ تَابَ مَعَكَ وَلَا تَطْغَوْا إِنَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. The translation is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the Prophet ﷺ here. He says, so be steadfast as you are commanded, O Prophet, along with those who turn in submission to Allah with you. And do not transgress. Surely He is seeing of what you believers do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, just hang in there. Just persist and persevere. Do what you are commanded to do. In a hadith, the Sahaba reported that when the Prophet ﷺ first heard this verse, he said that he felt he was getting older. When one grows old, what happens? Gray hair, back issues, leg pain. Sure. But with all that, one gets wiser. You attain wisdom with age. And if there is something that can make the Prophet ﷺ himself wiser, then imagine how powerful it can be. And imagine how much we can benefit from that. And the fact that it is accessible to us, this verse. So my final point in connecting all of this, Surah Hud and the circumstances of the Prophet himself, right? How does this apply to us? When we ourselves give dawah or wear our Muslim identity with pride in this nation, in this day and age, we may find a lot of hardships come along in our way. And that is very normal, such as mockery. People getting distant from you because you are too religious now. Weird impressions, weird looks. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you to the best of your abilities to make sure or to see how true you are to this identity that you are wearing. Right? And that is normal. But remember, when you do this work of da'wah, when you take this identity with you in pride, in public, you are in the company of the Prophet ﷺ. You are in the company of someone who is dwelling in Jannatul Firdaus, of someone for whom Jannatul Firdaus was granted on this earth itself. You are in great company. Obviously, we are not on his maqam, but we are trying to do the work that he did. He too encountered hardships. He too needed consolation. There's an entire surah dedicated to him, Surah Hud, the one we are talking about now. But this consolation doesn't just apply exclusively to him. It applies to all of us who walk in this path, who spread the message of Islam through their actions, words, or literally any other form that we can through. And rest assured that justice will be served to those who believe. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to stay steadfast on this deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to wear His religion as a badge of honor at all times. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Just a quick announcement that Isha will be from 9 p.m. tomorrow instead of 8:40. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.